Okay, good morning. Thank you for coming to today's Dharma message. We'll start by a moment of quiet sitting. I'll ring the bell and we'll sit for a few moments to quiet our minds. And then I'll ring the bell again and we'll continue with the message. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, Namanda, Namanda. So thanks again for coming. I'd like to start today's message by sharing a bit of writing from Shinran Shonin, our founder. If you could please join me in Gassho. I hope that everyone will, deeply entrusting themselves to the Nembutsu and firmly embracing prayers for peace in the world in their hearts, together say the Nembutsu. It would be splendid if all people who say the Nembutsu, not just yourself, do so not with thoughts of themselves, but for the sake of the imperial court and for the sake of the people of the country. Those who feel uncertain of birth should say the Nembutsu, aspiring first for their own birth. Those who feel that their own birth is completely settled should, mindful of the Buddha's benevolence, hold the Nembutsu in their hearts and say it to respond in gratitude to that benevolence, with the wish, may there be peace in the world and may the Buddha's teaching spread. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, Namanda, Namanda. During my message today, I'd like to talk a little bit about peace in Buddhism. There are many ways of doing that, but for now, I'd like to consider the passage from Shinran that I just shared with you. Many people might say that as Jodo Shinju Buddhists, we do not pray and we don't meditate. To me, that's a very interesting statement because each time I say Namo Amida Butsu, I am expressing my hopes, my dreams, my wishes, and ideally a sense of gratitude for everything that I have and all those who support me and love me. Sometimes I say Namo Amida Butsu simply to take a deep breath and calm my mind. That's a prayer for peace in my own heart. Then I might go for a hike, do some yoga, chant a sutra, or burn incense, and just try to think of things that make me happy. Sometimes I say Namo Amida Butsu, thinking of a friend or a family member who's sad or sick. That's a prayer for peace in their own mind and for the liberation from their suffering. But then I might call that person or send them an email or letter to see if there's anything I can do to help them and let them know that I'm grateful for them and that I love them. You see, each of these times of Nembutsu and prayer are always followed by some action, whether it be internal, an activity I do for myself, or something I do with others. Sometimes when I see terrible things happening in the world, I say Namo Amida Butsu. This is a prayer for peace in the world, just like Shinran encourages us to do. When I think deeply on how I contribute to these unfair events and how I might work to change the situations, our prayers for peace in the world depend deeply on how we define peace. So I would like for us to consider peace in our world right now. According to Wikipedia, peace is a concept of societal friendship and harmony in the absence of hostility and violence. In a social sense, peace is commonly used to mean a lack of conflict, such as war, and freedom from fear of violence between individuals or groups. I think a lot of the time, we see peace as a description of what is not happening. Peace means there's no fighting, no war, no conflict, or no discomfort. For me, peace is all of these things, but it's more too. Peace is when we all live in true equity. Peace means that all of us is cared for equally and acknowledges that that there are problems in the world where people are valued differently. Violence means much more than just physical threats of harm. It also includes social and economic violence, where people are treated differently because of their class, family wealth, mental or physical health and ability, their race, religion or creed, and they're deemed less valuable or important in society. Going hungry is an act of violence. Not being able to have a job or to have a home or pursue one's hopes and ambitions is violence. Getting sick, or worse yet, dying from preventable illness is violence. All of these things happen because we think that some people deserve resources and others do not. Whether or not we want to admit it, we have all agreed to these terms and conditions. It's how our economy is built. It's assigning value to everything, including human beings. This past year has been very hard on many of us. We've had to change so many fundamental aspects of how we live our day-to-day lives. And I wonder if this reflects a new sense of what is normal and what our society will be as human beings. First of all, we have to worry a lot about getting sick. Hopefully, many of us have also been concerned about getting others sick as well. The COVID pandemic has proven to be a life-altering event for all of us. In the US alone, 315,000 people have died this year, and more than 17.6 million people have contracted the virus. 7 people in my immediate family have been sick with COVID, and it's been very difficult for them. And even now, we aren't fully aware of how this virus will affect the quality of life for its survivors. Many people have reported lasting effects on their bodies that may take weeks, months, or even years to recover from. So many people have lost their jobs or are unable to work, and our government doesn't seem to be able to have any realistic solution to help those who are struggling financially. This virus is just one of the many recent causes of profound suffering for all of us. Though we are now beginning to have access to a vaccine, who's to say when the next great calamity will strike? Many of us already knew that the economy is not fair in the United States, that those with much continue to grow even more wealthy and to hoard rather than share their wealth. I've heard people say, oh, it's great. People can get rich. They worked hard and they keep working hard and they've earned what they have. I hope one day I can be rich like that too. I just have to keep working hard. Meanwhile, those same people demonize the poor and underprivileged as lazy people who are just expecting handouts. To those people, I ask, how many folks do you know who are poor and suffering? If you do, have you talked to them? Have you learned of their deepest hopes and dreams? Do you really think that there are so many people in the world's wealthiest country who are just lazy, who don't have goals to better themselves and the ones they love? The U.S. Center on Budget and Policy Priorities has a special series called the COVID Hardship Watch, which periodically gathers real-time data on how people are being impacted. And here are the latest figures as of December 18th, 2020. Overall, 1 in 6 adults with children said that their houses lacked sufficient food in the past 7 days. Overall, 22% of Black adults with children said they didn't have enough food for their families in the past 7 days. 21% of Latinx families with children said that they didn't have enough food to feed their family in the past 7 days. And 19% of Native or multiracial adult families with children said that they didn't have enough food for their family in the past 7 days. Overall, 1 in 5 renters are not caught up on rent. Almost 30% of Black people in the United States are behind on their rent. 1/4 of Latin people in the United States are behind on their rent. 25% of renters living with children are behind on their rent. 4 out of 10 children in renters' households face food and/or housing hardship. And finally, 13,714,000 adults report that their children in their household weren't eating enough food because they couldn't afford it. The cost of COVID is not merely people being sick or dying, though those are terrible events. This disease is wreaking havoc on our country, especially the people who don't have much already. They're the ones who are being hurt the most. Addressing this crisis, of course, requires us to stop the spread of COVID. However, the actual suffering this pandemic goes beyond the numbers of people who are infected or who died. This economic suffering is very real. We all must do our part, whatever that is, to address this suffering in order to bring peace to our nation. We must address this economic inequality and the violence that it perpetuates on those who do not have much in this country. It's very hard, but we have to stay home as much as possible. We have to wear masks in order to avoid making other people sick. We also have to give, if we are able, to support those who are struggling financially. Each of us has our own capacity to bring about peace, but it requires us to reflect and to understand what that capacity is. Shinran teaches us that our karma limits our actions in life. But if we consider carefully that karma, the causes and conditions that brought us to where we are and made us who we are today, then we might more clearly see what we may do as a part of our prayer for peace in the world and that the Buddhist teachings spread. Our practice of Nembutsu is more than just saying the name of Amida Buddha. Because when we think deeply about our connections to others and the world around us, our behavior changes too. Nembutsu should urge us to grow and change and seek peace in the world. I would like for us to consider deeply before making the blanket statement that Shin Buddhists do not pray. Our prayers might be the expression of our hopes and dreams for ourselves, our community, and the world. Or they could be an expression of gratitude for everything that we do have. Prayer has many meanings, and I truly believe that prayer is crucial in my own life as a way of accepting difficulty, but also of showing gratitude for all that I do have. My prayer of Nembutsu also helps me to understand ways that I might live my life and how I can understand suffering and find ways of lessening it for myself and for others. In Shinran's letter I quoted at the beginning of my message, he's encouraging his followers to come together and pray for the safety of one another and that the government would not persecute Nembutsu followers anymore. He encourages them to pray for the imperial court and all people in the country because the government and many people in the larger Buddhist organizations did not like Shinran's teacher Honen or his followers because they thought their form of Buddhist practice of saying Namo Amida Butsu was wrong. In fact, at one time, the government had exiled most of them to various countryside regions of Japan and removed their status as Buddhist monks. Two of Honen's followers were even executed. Shinran tells us in his writings that the actions of the government were unjust and wrong. Though Shinran often tells us that we are foolish beings filled with blind passions, and he also tells us that it's difficult, if not impossible, to know right from wrong. However, he had the courage to express his thoughts on the government's persecution of the Nembutsu movement. From his own experience of suffering, of being separated from his teacher, he knew this action was wrong. Yet, in spite of all of this, this exile allowed him to teach Nembutsu to new people in the countryside of Japan. So he was still able to help spread the teachings of Buddhism. I hope in considering the pain and suffering of so many of us have faced this year, and the scripture from Shinran is to say that we each have a way to pray and to live our lives as Buddhists. And those prayers, those expressions of Nembutsu and of gratitude, and our practice might be a little bit different for everyone. The story of Shinran Shonin is one that it might inspire us to all do our very best to promote peace in the world by sharing our faith. I think that all Buddhists wish for a peaceable and just society where we all feel safe and of equal value. This wish is a part of Shinran's message for us to pray for peace in the world. After attaining enlightenment, the Buddha traveled all over to teach his message of peace. And as we learn these teachings, I hope that we each learn ways to share that peace with others. In spite of the harsh persecution and loss that Shinran faced, he still spread the Pure Land teachings throughout Japan. And because of that, we're here today. Please join me in Gassho. I hope that everyone will, deeply entrusting to the Nembutsu and firmly embracing peace for prayers for peace in the world in their hearts, together say the Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, 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 Namanda. Thank you for attending this morning's Dharma message. I hope you have a nice week.